Hello and welcome to our video about drawing skulls. So I've given you this handout and it has a side view and a front view of a skull. And the purpose of this activity is to look at the proportions of the pieces of the skull and the skull as a total object so that we can familiarize ourselves with the structure of bone that makes the face. So it's really important for us to be able to understand the structure of the face in order to make a human portrait look proportional, and the skull is the thing that creates the base of the structure. So we're going to draw the side view and then we're going to draw the front view, and we don't have to do it in that order, but I've got to pick one. So I'm going to try to make this so you can see it. What I'm actually going to do, you do not have to do this, but I have limited space here that will fit in my video viewfinder thing. So in order for you to be able to see everything that I'm doing, or most of what I'm doing, I'm going to actually fold this in half for space purposes. Yeah, you can see everything. I have my actual skull here. And I also have my handouts that we colored in class because we're trying to learn the bones of the skull as we go along here. Okay, but for right now, I want us to just look at the whole shape. And the cranium is this part that encloses the brain. And it's very easy to not leave enough space for somebody to actually have a brain, either above the forehead in the frontal bone, or above the eye sockets in the frontal bone, or back here with the parietal and occipital bones. So I want to enlarge this a little bit. I'm going to do one sheet that's from the side and one sheet that's from the front. And I have an HB pencil, and I'm trying to copy this shape onto this piece of paper. So I'm just going to lay it out in a sketch. Okay, and this is kind of an egg. And I want to think about, is this going far enough forward? Like, do I have enough space up here? Is this frontal bone peaking at the right place? And I'm going to put this in here and see how it goes. Now, as I build up the drawing and add some other shapes, I'm going to be able to measure against this to see if it's correct. Okay, this portion of the face is like a trapezoid, squarish trapezoid. So I can go from the frontal bone back here to where the inferior maxillary meets into the temporal bone right here. Okay, and then straight across is gonna give me, if I go straight across here, that's gonna give me kind of like the midpoint of the nasal cavity, I guess we'll call it. Okay, and then here's the nasal bone, and then here's the base of that superior maxillary. Now the teeth flare out, and I want to judge like how much space am I looking at. This is maybe half of this, or 2/3. So I'm trying to think about how far down is the jawbone or the inferior maxillary coming. And these teeth curve out and the chin curves out. Now this is only one skull. So people have variation in the way they actually look, and this creates variation. Their skulls create variation in the way that they look, and if we lined everybody's skull up, we would have a lot of variety, but there's also a remarkable amount of similarity, and so we're looking for the similarity in this exercise. Okay, I'm trying to find all these shapes, so I'm looking for this cavity here. I'm changing my mind a little bit about the shape of this eye socket. And I'm always measuring like here to here, comes down. Okay, and I want this curve to match this curve. I could get it a little bit closer. That helps me. And really, as we look at the shape of these pieces, they're beautiful. Like the way they all fit together. I think one of the reasons that skulls are so popular, as much as they're scary and kind of tough looking when you put it on your biker jacket or whatever, it's a beautiful shape that you don't get tired of looking at. Okay, so I'm going to notice where this frontal bone makes its sutures up here. And you don't need to commit to doing this necessarily in the order that I'm doing it, but you certainly may. I just, as I encounter these shapes, I'm putting them in. Okay. See, here's the point where I'm intersecting. So I've got this piece coming down here. I want to make sure there's a little space between. And then I want to kind of feel out like this cross section of how much distance is here between here and here, this edge and this edge. I've got this kind of triangular corner. It's going to come just above where these teeth are going to go. This line comes down here, but then continues up here. So I've got lots of things that I'm measuring against. And I'm just going to try to get in some landmarks here. Okay. And then I can always use these shadows as shapes to give me more to measure off of. Okay, this is too wide. Okay, maybe I'm happy with this as a basic shape. And it takes some judgment, and this is not a simple shape to draw, as you can see. Okay, I think this is a structure. I think I've got something here that I can work with. And I want to make sure that I have the bones in here articulated. And I'm actually going to shade this just like I already have, or just like the drawing. And the reason I'm going to do that is to get an idea of the contours of the shapes. So the light and shadow gives me a good idea of where things are sticking out and where they're depressing. Okay, so I'm just coming in here with my HB, building up the drawing. Because these are my darkest values, so I can't mess up with the HB. Okay, and I haven't quite put this shape in, so we talked about this was the zygomatic arch. I'm going to name that as I go, because part of my purpose in doing this drawing is to try to learn the names of these bones and really understand their structure. Okay, so I've got this depression in here, and I can tell that it's there because it's very dark here. And I'm not going to get into my darkest value yet, but I am going to show myself that value. almost looks like his brow is furrowed. So I'm refining the shape as I go. And by drawing it, I'm creating a memory. I'm exploring the structure of this, what it looks like. I'm forming a visual memory. And if I were to say do this over and over again, my visual memory would get even better of what a skull looks like. Okay, I'm going to sharpen my pencil again. And I don't need this to be a hyper-realistic drawing, but I do need it to look three-dimensional, because the next thing we're going to do is actually do make a sculpture of the skull, because I'm trying to understand the three-dimensional quality of this. Okay, so I've got a shadow here. So there's going to be a dark area. I'm just laying in these values to get them in here. Where I can show shadow, I'm showing dimension. See, we've got a connection point here between the malar bone. This is the malar, and here's where it ends, right here, right? And then we got the zygomatic arch. Now we got the temporal bone. And we got this ridge here. And what this is showing us is actually that the skull has like a flattening that goes on. See, here we don't have it as much on this particular skull. I hope you can see this. But there is a little bit of flattening that happens on either side, especially for some people. That makes like a narrow face. And so we're going to pay attention to this. And then the darkest part, this is like light and shadow on a sphere. You see we have reflected light right here. This is our core shadow. just want to get some of this in here. And you can make your drawing more finished than I am, but I want to just mostly focus here on getting in these large shapes. And I'm looking, as you guys know how to do, at relative value. So I'm not putting in my darkest darks yet, but because I want to do that with a darker pencil, but I'm going to go ahead and lay things in here. I'm going to clean up a little bit over here with my eraser. And okay, this is my core shadow. I'm going to come back in here and make this a little more prominent. I could do some of this later shading with an H, or actually I'll show that. Let's demonstrate that. I'm going to go down to an H for some of these areas. And I am using very little pressure here. And you can see, just as I add a couple of layers, that it's getting darker in some areas, and I'm starting to see some dimension here in my drawing. So I'm laying this in very generally. And I'm pulling in one direction, just as I've taught you. You're not going to push back and forth, because then you're not in control in both directions. Okay, and this is all part of the parietal bone, so I don't want it to look like there's a suture here. The suture is actually back here. All right. All right, it's starting to look like something. I'm gonna go back to my H and kind of feather in this transition. And you should use your own instincts here in terms of what you think the drawing needs in terms of light and shadow. I'm gonna go back over here eventually with a darker pencil. But meanwhile, I will continue with my my HB, sorry. Like I said, I do these very late at night. Okay. And some of the shape here, there's almost like the swirling of the bone, which is actually quite interesting. Definitely need to sharpen my pencil at this point. I want to show myself this is a darker value. Here's a darker value. Here's a darker value. And to show that this kind of comes up, I've got to make this dark back here. I'm refining this shape as I'm examining it more closely. I need this to be light right here, because that's going to show that this is kind of scooped up a little bit. Because light and shadow is the main thing that I can use to show dimension. All right, as I come over here, I'm going to do a little bit. And this superior maxillary definitely has some contour that must determine like where teeth go. Because I'm going to put the teeth down at the end of these little channels. So I'm going to think about accuracy on that. And the front teeth, need them to come out far enough. And so here I'm doing a contour line drawing. I'm looking at this contour of this tooth, and then I'm doing the next contour. Okay. I think I have this too far forward. I think this curve actually comes back a little bit more. And I can actually start from this side, see what happens. Okay, it's a little better. I got a little tooth here. These are shorter on the bottom. Now teeth, if they're properly placed, are going to be like go every other one instead of right on top of each other. So I'm going to look for that here. So this tooth actually goes over underneath this tooth. That's important. This one comes over just a little bit. And you just want to kind of get lost in doing this for a second. You're going to let your intuitive visual take over. Just kind of walk this maze with your pencil for a minute. Okay. It's going to be dark down here. I'm going to sharpen my pencil again and try to look at the whole thing. And I'm getting pretty close. I've got a lot of dimension here. I can tell where it's light and shadow. And you need to use your instincts. So this video is showing me drawing, but you can do things in a different order. This isn't as prescribed as what you've necessarily been used to in the past, because this is more complex, so you should follow what you think is the next thing. Like the progression of your thought matters here. Okay. Okay. Let me make sure I can see these. Okay, I'm gonna work a little bit on shading these teeth, just to make this whole drawing come together. And I just want to get a general sense in here. I mean, we could spend 45 hours on this drawing, but we're not going to do that. I just want a general amount of dimension from shading. It's gotten a little too dark. Okay, I'm gonna grab a darker pencil here. I'm gonna go for a 3B. I'm gonna lay in some of this core shadow that I've got back here. Turning my pencil a little bit to try to maximize the sharpness that I can get out of it without having to sharpen it. That's starting to look a little more dimensional. Okay, and then when I get to these dark areas, I'm actually going to go in here with the 5B. My 5B is already pretty sharp, but and if I can show this dark shadow here at the edge, you see how that like really starts to pop. I'm going to define that edge. So this part looks more more three-dimensional. And all I'm doing is observing relative value. So I've got my 3B in my one hand and my 5B in the other hand, and I'm passing them between each other. This is the 3B. This isn't a super dark value, so I don't need the 3B for this area, but look, I've got that little lip here. I'm gonna get out my 5B for that. And look, you see how that feels like it's curving around. Okay, I'm showing this here. This is one of the darkest areas. Now, I'm not pressing hard. And I'm gonna switch from the 5B back to the 3B to make this value kind of feather out a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna come in here with my eraser and sharp part of my eraser. Okay, I don't want to be as dark as 3B, so I'm gonna go, let's see what we can do with a 2H right here. Bring a little sharpness here. I'm gonna go for a B right here along this ridge on the frontal bone that makes that bump where eyebrows come out. Now I can also kind of clean this up a little bit. And go back to my HB because that's what I originally had here. I'm gonna recapture a little bit of the shading that I had. And my shading isn't entirely smooth. I don't want to take the time to make it entirely smooth. I just want to explore. I'm exploring here. The undulations of the bone. Okay, this kind of flare wing shape is important for understanding how this temporal bone kind of twists. And it's beautiful, so I want to get that in here. And if I control this value, that helps. Okay. And then I'm getting close. I'm gonna go in here with a 5B. I'm getting close to this area, having the dimension that I needed to have. And as I'm copying this other artist's rendition of the skull, I'm learning from him. Because he's using light and shadow appropriately to describe the shapes of the skull. And so I'm figuring out, as I'm copying this, what's effective. I'm learning his ideas. And I'm listening to him think a little bit. So he's showing us that these areas of the bone are pretty far back. Okay, I'm going to switch back to a 3B for this area. I don't want it to be as dark as it can be. Okay, but there I've showed some dimension. I might be able to do a little better. Because if I can pop out these light areas. All right, so all that's looking good. And then my 5B here. Okay, I don't want to go 5B with that. We're gonna go 3B. Now I have a 6B. I just don't think I need that in this drawing. We'll see at the end. But I don't want to go to my darkest pencil unless I'm in my darkest areas. And this whole thing has some shade on it. I'm going to sharpen my pencil. And here I'm thinking about, where does the superior maxillary end and the nasal bone begin, or vice versa. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. The thing that's making these teeth really look dimensional is this dark value in between the areas of the teeth. And you see, as I just grab that contour with the darker value, that it helps okay, so it's starting to come to life a little bit. Now see, I don't have as much darkness down there, so I'm going to skip over and do in between the teeth over here. And okay, let me go back to my HB and just get a little bit of this tooth dimension. And this is interesting because we live with our teeth and we know that they have lots of different planar surfaces, but it's kind of interesting to observe what they look like. Like, we've got these triangles and these little raised areas, and teeth are really like this. In our mind, it's very easy to simplify everything to be you know, sort of like a rounded, perfect version of itself. But everything about us is unique to us. Like, we have these features that just don't stop being refined to each individual person, which is amazing. Now, typically, you're not going to draw the texture of somebody's teeth, but you might need to. But it adds a lot to this drawing to have that. Okay, I want to go with a darker value than what I've already used, so I'm going to go with this 3V. And I want this to be dark. I'm going to go back in here with my 5B and clean up this contour a little bit. And this splits a little bit. And then this is going to be a dark value again. So that's going to need the 5B. I'm working with my 3B right now. So I'm going to get a little bit of this where the teeth meet the inferior maxillary. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with that up there. Let me go back in one more time with the 5B. Let me get the edge of this to be nice and dark, because these are some of my darkest darks. Okay, so I'm going to look at the whole drawing and say, is there anything that just really needs to be changed in terms of value in order to describe the shape? And I think I'm fine. I want to push on this eye socket a little bit more, because I see that as kind of popping out at me, and I want it to recede. Okay, so I've explored sufficiently, I think, the shape of the skull and from the side, and you're also going to do the one from the front, but I want you to try to apply what you've learned in this drawing session to that front one and see if you can manage to do that yourself. This has sort of been looser than what we have done in the past, because we're moving towards more independence in our drawing and more personal decision making. And so I look forward to seeing your drawings and seeing what you guys come up with. All right.